Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. For those who are new, we are going through Sri Aurobindo's The Synthesis of Yoga. We are now on the part 1, 6th chapter, and we are going line by line and dwelling on these lines. Very act of reading these lines is a way of connecting to his force, and it is a sadhana in itself to imbibe his consciousness, his force through these lines. And to follow the text, you will find the link in the description where you can see this chapter, and we will be starting with paragraph number 20. In our last episode, which was 83, we learned that without power, love and knowledge cannot be effective and expressive in life. They will remain an inner experience, but very little possibility of its outer, external manifestation. But at the same time, while love and knowledge in its essence is very obviously something divine and sacred, when we are looking at power, as our old saying goes, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So how do we deal with this dimension of power that has this tendency to corrupt everything? At the same time, we have also learned that power essentially in its source is divine. Just like knowledge is divine but distorted in its workings, limited in its workings here. So is love. In its essence, it is divine, but here in its workings, it gets limited, distorted. So is power in its source divine, because it comes from the divine Shakti, the power of the divine for creative manifestation. But here in manifestation, it undergoes certain substantial distortions. And transforming this power is essential, because without it, love and knowledge cannot find its fullness of expression. And at the same time, if a corrupted power is supporting love and knowledge, a limited power, a distorted power, it will degenerate both love and knowledge. And both mind, our mind, human mind, doesn't really have the power to transform this vital life force. So is our love, doesn't have the power to really make it sublime and refined. In order to do that, mind and love has to ascend to higher levels of consciousness, all the way to spiritual and supramental, and bring that down in order to transform. But an untransformed vital being will not let you ascend in the first place. You cannot climb all the way to the supramental without transforming the vital. And at the same time, without bringing down the supermind, we cannot fundamentally transform this vital either. So that's the catch-22 situation. A trap, it seems, outwardly. And yet, integral yoga demands that even if all other yogic paths are denying that this cannot be changed, integral yoga's very stand is that this can be changed and there is a way forward. And that can be found in its very nature and very fundamental principle itself. That is where we need to find the key. Now let's move on with the episode 84, starting with paragraph 20. all the difficulty in dealing spiritually with the works of life arises because the will in life for its purposes in the ignorance. Will in life for its purposes in the ignorance. We are living in ignorance. It is in ignorance we are groping and searching for light, for truth, for love, beauty, harmony, delight. So, will in life for its purposes in ignorance has created a false soul of desire. A false soul of desire. When we look into ourselves, we see the movement of desire. And this desire, it has not only just crude forms, but something that feels very beautiful, very fine hunger of the heart for its affections and its needs, which we often confuse for the soul. There is a false soul of desire within us, which is in a way refined, but not yet the original essential nature of the soul, but it feels like something very noble, beautiful of our tenderness of our heart, which we can experience in our fine moments. And that part is what we are referring here as a false soul of desire. Soul of desire. A frontal heart, a frontal layer of our emotions, our emotional being. We confuse our emotional being for the soul. Often this emotional being is oppressed by the rational mind and its lid, and when we gradually open it up, the emotional being shows up and we confuse it for the soul. The will in life for its purposes in ignorance has created a false soul of desire and substituted it for that spark of the divine, which is the true psyche. The word psyche, coming from the Greek original, represents the soul. But it is way deep within, as Sri Aurobindo referred earlier. 9/10 of it is buried deep within. Whereas in the frontal layer, we experience our fine emotions, which we consider mistakenly to be the soul, and our emotional needs of our heart and its emotional hunger, emotional needs, however fine, refined it is. Movement essentially is carried by its desire for love and affection, and the need for that bonding and connection. All that we easily confuse for the soul. So all the difficulty in dealing spiritually with the works of life arises because the will in life for its purposes in ignorance has created a false soul of desire and substituted it for that spark of the divine, which is the true psyche. So when there is this false soul of desire, and it has its likes and dislikes, its emotional preferences, its emotional needs, and that drives our works. Our worldly action is largely driven by emotional needs, whether it is emotional need for power and fame, so that you are feeling loved, respected, whatever be the disguise it uses. Even when we do the altruism, behind it is there is the soul of desire, desiring to be seen as the altruistic, generous man or woman who looks very kind-hearted, and you feel good helping the poor. All that is part of this, what outwardly looks very refined, beautiful, yet it is a soul of desire. all the difficulty in dealing with spiritually with the works of life arises because the will in life for its purposes and ignorance has created a false soul of desire and substituted it for that spark of the divine, which is the true psyche. That spark behind is veiled, which is the true psyche. And it is covered by our emotional being that is in front. Yes, our crude emotions, we can clearly recognize this is nothing to do with the soul. And crude desires, we can clearly recognize this is not the soul. But when it comes to more and more finer emotions, that is where the confusion comes into the picture. All or most of the works of life are at present or seem to be actuated and vitiated by the soul of desire. So, our works of life, our daily life activities of production, active life, creation, engaging with the wider world, its battle, its conquest, everything is activated, driven, as well as spoiled by this soul of desire. It colors it. Even those that are ethical or religious, even those that wear the guise of altruism, philanthropy, self-sacrifice, self-denial, are shot through and through with the threads of its making. So this soul of desire can appear to be very noble in its kindness, its self-sacrifice, self-denial, philanthropy, altruism, everything. You are happy to deny your own personal needs to make someone else happy. All that is part of this soul of desire, and it feels often very good. So all or most of the works of life are at present or seem to be actuated and vitiated. Vitiated means slightly spoiled, distorted, twisted, vitiated by this soul of desire. Even those that are ethical or religious. Ethical, we come with our philosophical frameworks of looking at the world. We decide inclusivity as a social principle, compassion to the animal as a social principle, and you feel the pain of all that. And our emotional being easily get identified with the pain of the animals, the birds, or the people who are suffering, the poor. And this emotional being, with all its generosity, kindness, self-sacrifice to serve the poor, and it's very common, particularly the NGO sector, where there is a great deal of this deep love for fellow beings and that emotional affinity, the community, the bonding, the family dimension, the connection with larger community and larger nature and life, which our emotional being loves to engage with. And it's noble, it's beautiful. And this is often mistaken for the soul. Soul connect. When we say we have a soul connect, we are largely engaging with an emotional bond that we share with people. Even those that wear the guise of altruism, philanthropy, self-sacrifice, self-denial are shot through and through with the threads of its making. This soul of desire is a separative soul of ego. Separative soul of ego. We are operating from ego. And ego is the principle that gives the false sense of I, me, and myself. So all that experiences you as an individual has gone through is organized into your identity, your personal story, the birth and growth of your particular body through which you are looking at the world, and identifying with it and imagining that that is what you are. But that is a surface ego personality, and it is the soul of this ego, this little emotional being behind it, the soul of desire, and the ego together, they are very good allies. So this soul of desire is a separative soul of ego. It is also a separative soul. Ego's primary experience is that I am separate from you. There is a sense of separation. Ego gives this deep sense of separation. And then ego is building bridges. There are beautiful, good relationships, and there are neutral relationships. Then there are painful relationships of conflict with the world, where ego uses the dimension of power to conquer and battle it out and control. And even when the ego comes into human relationships, where you see the control games, even when you have fallen in love, after some time you see that control game starts, the power game starts, the need to dominate, to be in charge. And these are all the typical expressions of ego. And it has this deep sense that you are separate and I have to control you one way or other. Even if I love you deeply, I want to be in control. And it has this deep sense of separation. You are separate from me. This soul of desire is a separative soul of ego, and all its instincts are for a separative self-affirmation. So ego has this native instinct to affirm itself. Initially, we are part of a collective ego, unconsciously identified with our social constructs, our social habits, cultural inheritance. You get identified with it, you believe you are that. My identity is woven with the cultural context in which I am born, and within that, slowly you individualize and become a separate ego. And you are able to objectively look at your own culture, but it is still a sense of deeply separated individual who is asserting, now I want to assert my likes, my preferences, my goals over goals of other people. And each one has their own goals, territories, and in that context comes the frictions, conflicts, that from individual levels to all the way to the nation states. These are the larger forms of national egos, even the religious formations, egos. You identify with these vaster movements, create your identity around it, the story around it. I am this, I am a Hindu, I am a Christian, I am a Muslim, I am Indian, I am Tamil, I am British, all that identities we create. This is separative, self-affirming ego and its operation. It pushes away openly or under more or less shining masks. Sri Aurobindo's subtle humor. Openly or under more or less shining masks that we wear for its own growth, for possession, for enjoyment, for conquest and empire. Even the tiniest, weakest human being is trying to make their own little empire, where they have their own growth, possession, enjoyment, conquest and empire. Now the same thing scaled up all the way to nation states. They are also trying to grow your GDP and possess more and more territories and enjoy all the material opulence and conquest of not just territories, go to the outer space, conquer Mars, conquer Moon. This sense of expansion, conquest, it is there instinctively in human nature. When the ego is driving it, it has this deep sense of separation and it is trying to expand and enlarge its empire. Because fundamentally, There is this instinctive drive for expansion and self-assertion in this ego-driven life. So this soul of desire is a separative soul of ego, and all its instincts are for a separative self-affirmation. It pushes always, openly or under more or less shining masks, for its own growth, for possession, for enjoyment, for conquest and empire. If the curse of disquiet and disharmony and perversion is to be lifted from life, the curse, the life energy in us, the vital force in us, it's almost like it is cursed for disquiet, disharmony and perversion. Our vitality has this tendency for aggression, conflict or sorrow and suffering. Either it is collapsing inward or it is rushing outwardly into conquest and confrontations, creating disharmony. And search for pleasure, satisfaction of its sensual pleasures, its ambitions, its desires, that leads to all kinds of perversions, disharmony, disquiet, ashanti, lack of peace, disquiet. If the curse of disquiet and disharmony and perversion is to be lifted from life, if we are to remove these disquiet, disharmony and perversion, the true soul, the psychic being, must be given its leading place. There must be a dissolution of the false soul of desire and ego. So here comes the work. So Sri Aurobindo is coming back to the same source that will liberate us, the psychic being that is behind, that is veiled. Now he has given one more detail. Here is a frontal emotional being, which is the false soul of desire, which we confuse for the soul. And this false soul of desire works together with ego. So together in their paired journey, there is this deep sense of separation, self-affirmation. And unless these two are dissolved, we cannot find that inner center from where we can actually heal the disquiet, disharmony and perversion of the vital nature within us. That is the requirement. Dissolving the soul of desire and ego. These two things, soul of desire and ego, are the two knots that binds everything, because we are living in surface ego personality and it's animated by desire, and this soul of desire creates its ashanti, disharmony, pain, suffering. And remember, Buddha had clearly identified this character. Life with all its aging and disease and death and suffering. And the cause of suffering is desire. And there is this false ego personality, the sense of I, me and myself. This falsehood has to be dissolved. That is central to that teaching. So if the curse of disquiet and disharmony and perversion is to be lifted from life, the true soul, the psychic being, must be given its leading place. And there must be a dissolution of the false soul of desire and ego. So when this false soul of desire and ego is dissolved, then the pure psyche from deep within, that inner spark of the divine, can emerge and become the leader. Otherwise, it cannot become the leader. These two frontal personalities, two aspects, the soul of desire and the ego, these two will run the show. That is where our identification is, our sense of identity is, our sense of motivation in life is. But this does not mean that life itself must be coerced and denied its native line of fulfillment. So dissolving the false soul of desire and ego doesn't mean that this life energy in us is to be denied or coerced, forced, persuaded, pressurized. That is not what is meant. So this does not mean that life itself must be coerced and denied its native line of fulfillment. There is a native line of fulfillment for the life energy in us, the vital force in us. For behind this outer life soul of desire, there is in us an inner and true vital being. Here is the very interesting character in our story. So now we have one character called the ego, then we have the second character called the soul of desire. Our life energy, its desires, even if it is refined. This is the second character, the soul of desire. Then we have the psychic being, the psyche, the emerging psychic, the spark that is emerging from within. Now he is introducing the true vital. There is a frontal vital, that is where the soul of desire is. And now he is introducing there is actually a true vital. Let's find out what is this true vital is. And this distinction is very crucial in integral yoga and our own inner transformation. For behind this outer life soul of desire, there is in us an inner and true vital being. It is inner. There is an outer personality, then there is an inner being, outer being, inner being. And this true vital being is in the inner domain. There is in us an inner and true vital being which has not to be dissolved. This should not be dissolved. This inner vital being, the true vital being, is not to be dissolved. It is the frontal desire soul and the ego that is to be dissolved. So there is in us an inner and true vital being which has not to be dissolved but brought out into prominence. Not only not to be dissolved but to be brought out into prominence and released to its true working as a power of the divine nature. So the true vital has to be brought out in prominence and released to its true working as a power of the divine nature. In the nature, there is a divine aspect, and this is a power of the divine nature, and that has to be brought forth. Whereas the frontal outer being and its ego formations, its desire soul has to be dissolved. Then we need to go inward into the true vital being. This has to be discovered, and it has a true working. He hasn't explained what that true working is. We will come to it. It has a true working. It has to be brought out to prominence and released to its true working as a power of the divine nature. So let's review this line once again. But this does not mean that life itself must be coerced and denied its native line of fulfillment. For behind this outer life soul of desire, there is in us an inner and true vital being which has not to be dissolved but brought out into prominence and released to its true working as a power of the divine nature. This recognition is very crucial because in the sadhana, often what people do in the name of dissolving the desire soul and the ego is they coerce them, pressurize them, and deny them so that they become quiet and silent. You may have a great deal of knowledge, great depth of understanding, but that knowledge cannot flow into life and effective action if the true vital has not emerged. Or you may have refined your heart with an experience of beautiful sublime emotions and even a psychic touch, but it cannot be effective in life without finding this true vital being emerging to take forward your expressive life in the material world. So that is brought in by this inner true vital, which is not often recognized. So the many ascetic traditions do dissolve this coerce and or dissolve or suppress this soul of desire and the ego. But if you don't open to the true vital, then the creative force will not be there. It will be a quietude without creative force. So let's read this very, very important part. But this does not mean that life itself must be coerced and denied its native line of fulfillment. For behind this outer life, soul of desire, there is in us an inner and true vital being, which has not to be dissolved, but brought out into prominence and released into its true working as a power of the divine nature. It is truly a power of the divine nature, and it is not to be denied, not to be dissolved, but has to be brought out prominently and released in its true working. And what is the true working of this true vital being, which is inner? We have this outer being, and then there is this inner being which we are now discovering. The prominence of this true vital being under the lead of the true inmost soul within us. Inmost soul. It's important to understand the hierarchy here. There is an outer being. It's ego, desire soul, outer mind, all that, and our bodily shell. Behind it, there is an inner range, and that's where the true vital is, inner vital being. And then there is the inmost, that is the psychic, the true spark, the divine spark within. So there is the three concentric circles: the outer, the inner, the inmost. The inmost is our psychological center, the soul within, the psychic being. The prominence of this true vital being under the lead of the inmost, the true inmost soul within us, is the condition for the divine fulfillment of the objects of the life force. So bringing this out, the prominence of this true vital being under the lead of the true inmost being. So this inner vital, the true vital, has to be led by the soul within, the psychic being. The emerging psychic being is the leader to whom this inner vital is an instrument. Then only it is the condition for the divine fulfillment of the objects of the life force. This tremendous vitality in us, if it is to fulfill itself, first it has to discover its true nature, not this turbulent outer being which is reacting to life all the time and getting into disquiet, disharmony and conflict. When you dissolve them, you will discover the true vital being. But it is not even that true vital being that is the leader. Behind the true vital being is the psychic being. Who is the leader? Whom this true vital become the instrumentation, powerful instrumentation. It is really the Hanuman within who is really ready to serve our Rama within. The divinity within is served by this liberated true vital being, which recognizes the divinity, surrenders to it and follows. Those objects will even remain the same in essence, but transformed in their inner motive and outer character. So the objects of life force, with its will to growth, self-affirmation, conquest, battle with life, all that it can still do, but inwardly there is a great inner shift that is happening. The inner motive is what is transformed, and with that inner shift comes the outer character changing. The objects of life force, to master life that is around, to possess, to enjoy, all that will remain, but the fundamental nature has shifted. Transformed in their inner motive and outer character, the way things find expression will change, even if the objective will be same. Life force has an objective. At a deepest level, the power seeks the divine, and that will come to prominence. These objects will remain the same in essence, but transformed in their inner motive and outer character. The divine life power too will be a will for growth. So that will be there, a will for growth. Life energy has this native will to grow, and we see it everywhere. In the plant kingdom, we see the growth. Growth is their essence. Look at grass to plants to trees. They are all growing. That urge to grow. In human beings, it gets translated more into other dimensions of growth. We are not just physically growing. Our body doesn't grow beyond certain size. But we can grow in our capacities, our doing capacities, grow in our material wealth, our large networks, growing of our networks, relationships, fields of work, expansion. This is very natural. The growth is a fundamental drive of life. There is nothing wrong with growth. But that urge to grow will become refined, and the purpose of growth will get revealed when the true vital emerges and the psychic guidance is leading us. Then why grow will become clear. But the growth in itself will remain. That's one of the very fundamental nature of the life energy. It wants to grow, a will for growth, a force of self-affirmation. It's not just growing. It wants to affirm itself and exist. You're not just growing, you want to establish yourself, affirm yourself. This is also part of the nature of the life energy. Establishing, affirming the force of self-affirmation, but now not coming from the ego, not coming from the separative sense, not coming from the disquiet desires and ambitions, but coming from the guidance of the psychic being and the massive force of the true vital within us. But affirmation of the divine within us, that is what it does. It will affirm the divine, and the will of the vital will obey that because it is under the direct guidance coming from the psychic. Affirmation of the divine within us, not of little temporary personality on the surface. So there is an outer surface personality. It is temporary, whereas that which is deep within is not temporary formation. It is something that goes through the cycles of birth and evolving here in time. It has taken birth to experience this world, and it uses the true vital as its instrument to affirm itself and express its divinity. Affirmation of the divine within us, not of the little temporary personality on the surface. Growth into the true divine individual, that is the very purpose. Growth into the true divine individual. This is the true individualization. Otherwise, there is a crystallization, individualization of the ego, which eventually experience itself to be alone, separate, isolated, fall into depression because it's too lonely. That is where ego culminates. Or it will go on conquering all kinds of things in order to fulfill itself, and it will never be satisfied with all the outer conquest. That's the nature of the ego, driven by the soul of desire. Whereas the true individual has to be discovered. That is the true individualization, what we learn in integral yoga. Growth into the true divine individual, the central being, the secret, imperishable person. Interesting line. Imperishable person, Akshara Purusha. It is Akshara is non-decaying. Purusha is person, the being. So there is something within us which is deathless. As in the Gita, it would say it cannot be cut by the sword, burnt by fire, wet by waters. Nothing will touch it. This is the non-destructive aspect within us. And it is also referred to as the central being. It is our psychological center. So we have the outer being, inner being, and the inmost. That inmost is referred to as the psychic being, or also as the central being, because it is the one that holds together all the instrumental layers and coordinates them, harmonizes them. If this center emerges when we become conscious of it and allow its guidance, its leadership, then the true individuality emerges, true harmonization happens, and this true vital being the powerful instrument of action in the world. The divine life power too will be a will for growth, a force of self-affirmation, but affirmation of the divine within us, not of the little temporary personality on the surface. Growth into the true divine individual, the central being, the secret, imperishable person, who can emerge only by the subordination and disappearance of the ego. This true being within us, this central being, can emerge only when this outer ego personality and desire soul is dissolved or subordinated. Then this inner truth and power can reveal itself. This is life's true object. Growth, but a growth of the spirit in nature. Growth is an absolutely essential quality of life energy. As I already touched upon, the growth in trees, plants, that's where it becomes very materially visible to us. And then there is the same urge in us to grow, enlarge, psychologically, inwardly, in many different ways. This is life's true object, growth, but a growth of the spirit in nature. This inmost divinity within, that has to grow, that has to affirm itself. There comes the affirmation part. Affirming and developing itself in mind, life, and body. These are the three instrumental layers. So this emerging psychic being has to grow and govern mind, life, and body. And it is itself developing and developing these instruments so that it can express itself through this instrumentation. Then possession, that is the second fundamental nature of the vital life force. First is growth, second is possession. Possession, but a possession by the divine, of the divine in all things. Our normal external being and its soul of desire, it wants to possess all the objects of desire, whether it is people, land, or things. These are all objects of desire. Whereas the soul, the psychic being emerging and leading and taking up the power, that too is seeking to possess, but possessing the divine in things. In the world of material existence, behind all the apparent contradictions and forms that we see, there is an essential divine. It is that divinity is to be possessed. It's a possession, but a possession by the divine of the divine in all things. So the divine in us take possession of the divine in all things, and not of things for their own sake, by the desire of the ego. So this is what ego and surface personality will do, that will want to possess for the sake of possessing. So growth, possession. Now comes the third, enjoyment. But an enjoyment of the divine Ananda in the universe. There is a self-existent delight within that will find its expression in this possession, in this growth, in this self-affirmation, the divinity expressing itself. There is an enjoyment of that, the radiance of the Ananda from within. Enjoyment, but an enjoyment of the divine Ananda in the universe. Battle and conquest and empire. That's the next thing it would do. Battle and conquest and empire. No wonder the most celebrated stories of India, Ramayana and Mahabharata, where there is incarnation of Vishnu, Sri Rama and Sri Krishna. The story is full of battle and conquest and empire building. These are not only built on the memory of ancient past historic events, but also the story of the soul's growth, expansion, conquest. Battle and conquest and empire in the shape of a victorious conflict with the powers of darkness. In the shape of a victorious conflict. There is a conflict, confrontation. Like in the story of Sri Rama, there is a confrontation with Ravana and a conquest with the powers of darkness. Powers of darkness. An entire spiritual self-rule and mastery. An entire spiritual self-rule and mastery over inward and outward nature. It's not only inward nature, there is an outer nature to be conquered. So here is where we need to clearly understand these stories represent. It's not only an inner conquest, but there is also affirmation in the outer world of the divine nature, where the egos are to be confronted. The 10 heads of Ravana, head is what? That is where the ego amplification happens. The mind exaggerates things and it becomes the Rakshasic, Asuric nature, which has to be conquered by the divine power. Similarly, in Mahabharata, we see again the egos standing on the way of establishing dharma in the world, and these are to be conquered. So a growth of your inner being and its expression in the world involves both this inner growth, possession, enjoyment, battle, conquest and empire, inner and outer, in the shape of a victorious conflict with the powers of darkness, an entire spiritual self-rule and mastery over inward and outward nature, a conquest by knowledge, love and divine will over the domains of the ignorance. So when the soul takes birth in this world, it is taking birth in this world of ignorance, in the world of avidya, full of vedana, pain, suffering. And getting out of it requires rediscovery of the Veda. Veda is the true secret within us, the inner guide, the psychic being emerging and leading and discovering this liberating this true vital being, dissolving the outer ego, desire soul, so that the growth of this divinity within, and this divinity within will find its expression through knowledge, love, and divine will. All three instruments grow splendidly together, integrally, and this is where integral yoga finds its ground and integral movement, the emergence of the psychic being, where there is this knowing, knowledge, love, and divine will moving together. Conquest by knowledge, love, and divine will over the domains of ignorance, this outer material nature in which we find ourselves embedded. This domain of ignorance is progressively conquered by the emerging divinity from within. It's not only an inner conquest, it is also an outer affirmation of that divine knowledge, love, and power. So this is life's true object. Growth, but a growth of the spirit in nature. So when we see nations struggling to grow their GDP, and there is this whole conquest to grow, economic growth, behind it, look deeper, we need to find the purpose of growth itself. We need to redefine the very purpose of growth. It is to bring out the divinity in human nature, not to fulfill the soul of desire with endless variety of objects of desire. Consumerist culture is feeding these objects to the soul of desire and the ego. It amplifies the ego, amplifies the soul of desire, and through that it is growing its economy, and through that it is destroying the world, polluting the world. It's a false sacrifice. Sacrifice to the wrong forces. Therefore the pollution, therefore the destruction, therefore the disharmony, degeneration of nature. Because this outer being and its desire soul and ego are the central movements which is fed by our contemporary modern civilization through its consumerist culture, whereas the essential purpose of life, true object of life, this is life's true object, growth, but a growth of the spirit in nature, affirming and developing itself in mind, life, and body. Possession, but a possession by the divine, of the divine in all things, not of things for their own sake, by the desire of the ego. Enjoyment, but an enjoyment of the divine Ananda in the universe. Battle and conquest and empire in the shape of a victorious conflict with the powers of darkness. An entire spiritual self-rule and mastery over inward and outward nature. A conquest by knowledge, love, and divine will over the domains of ignorance. So if mind seeks knowledge and truth, heart seeks love, power seeks its growth, possession, enjoyment, battle, conquest. That is its true nature, and this can be done when the true vital emerges, the outer ego and desire soul are dissolved, and this one emerges and discovers its true object of life nature. These are the conditions, and these must be the aims of the divine effectuation of the works of life. So we have seen works of knowledge, works of love. Now he has given us insights into works of life. Remember, this whole part that we are going through, these 6 chapters that we have covered, this part is called works of yoga of divine works. And in that divine works, there are 3 layers: works of knowledge, works of love, and works of life. And works of life is where this whole battle with outer nature and life come into the picture. And its conquest, possession, enjoyment, all that come into picture. And there are conditions for that. that is dissolving of the ego, the desire soul to be dissolved, discovering the true vital, and the true vital being led by the psychic being. These are the conditions, and these must be the aims of the divine effectuation of the works of life and their progressive transformation, which is the third element of the triple sacrifice. The triple sacrifice: sacrifice of knowledge, sacrifice of love, sacrifice of works of life. In that triple, this is the third element, and there is this progressive transformation of the life energy itself. This is how it unfolds. These are the conditions, and these must be the aims of the divine effectuation of the works of life and their progressive transformation, which is the third element of the triple sacrifice. It is not a rationalization but a supramentalization. We have our mind with its incredible rational intelligence, its philosophical sophistication, its values. Yes, it can do certain level of control over the vital nature, but the human vital nature is too powerful to be always under the control of the mental being and its rational intelligence. That's why there is a huge difference between scientists who will find the formulas of forces of nature. Then we see politicians who represent more of the vital and the dimension of power. Scientists represents more dimension of knowledge and reason. But the human vital comes out in the form of a politicians who are battling against other nation states, who makes bombs, atom bombs, hydrogen bombs, and all kinds of weaponization of the knowledge of the scientists. This is a typical problem. The rationalization cannot truly control. There are so many philosophers talking about the ideal world, but the politicians don't necessarily listen. And the battle of life, even when something like communism establishes itself proclaiming equality of all, they have to battle against other philosophies, and the same drama repeats. All knowledge is put into the battle. So rationalization by itself is insufficient because it cannot truly master the life energy. Politicians are not going to be listening to the scientists, and scientists don't have that trauma vital force to affirm. Mental power is limited. It is not a rationalization but a supramentalization. We need to discover the supermind and bring it down, then alone this transformation is possible. Not a moralizing but a spiritualizing of life. What rationalization and philosophy and religion does is bringing morality, moralizing. That is what we see in the world, and with its moral police in all kinds of forms, censor boards of the world, morality police. Yes, it is needed, otherwise all the perversions will find expression. Even in the name of art, all kinds of perversions are finding expression, and violence finds its expression. Justifying, saying that this is what is there in life, art is only a reflection of life. We are not saying anything new. Instead of art refining and sublimating life itself, art become a imitation of this crude stuff of unregenerated vital. It is not a rationalization but a supramentalization, not a moralizing but a spiritualizing of life. That is the object of the yoga. The yoga looks at transformation of life from this point of view. It is not about moralizing life. It is not about rationalizing life. It's about supramentalizing, spiritualizing. So there is a fundamental difference between moral constructs. And unfortunately, we do find various schools reducing spirituality into moral constructs. Yes, it is derived from a spiritual insight. Thou shalt not cheat, thou shalt not tell lies, all kinds of rules and regulations. But when it emerges as a moral construct, not an imperative of your soul's native truth. Then it becomes a mental construct which gets easily washed away or distorted or twisted by the life energy for its own fulfillment. So it is not a rationalization but a supramentalization, not a moralizing but a spiritualizing of life. That is the object of yoga. There had been throughout history attempts to transform life, to create a harmonious life on earth, harmonious society on earth, to establish truth. But all the efforts gave some excitement for some time and it fades away. There is no fundamental transformation happening. For a small cycle of time, there is some effective harmony, then it degenerates, disintegrates. All the great masters come and establish their teachings, and progressively, as it starts disintegrating and degenerating, they bifurcate into various schools and branches, specializing and proclaiming that my branch is the most sacred, the real truth. Every other branch did not get it fully. My particular school got it truly. I am the representative of the original. That is the claim that gets made when these things degenerate and disintegrate and bifurcate. It is not a rationalization but a supramentalization, not a moralizing but a spiritualizing of life. That is the object of the yoga. It is not a handling of externals or superficial psychological motives. There is external, our ego and soul of desire. You can analyze it as much as you want and try to modify it as much as you want, but it won't lead anywhere. It is not a handling of externals or superficial psychological motives. Superficial psychological motives. And there is a whole lot of now psychological analytical processes trying to dig deeper into the human psyche to find the motives, the underlying complexes, to identify the drives, the irrational fears and forces that are erupting from the deep interior nature. It is not the handling of the externals or the superficial psychological motives that is the main purpose, but a refounding of life and its action on their hidden divine element. We are to found life itself in its original divine element, rediscovering the true vital and leading the true vital with the psychic guidance, and of course then opening to the Shakti descending from above. These are the central motives, movements by which the transformation is accomplished. A refounding of life and its action on their hidden divine element. For only such a refounding of life can bring about its direct government by the secret divine power above us. So there is a secret divine power within us, the psychic being 9/10 invisible. Then there is a divine power above us, superconscient. The Shakti above, the soul within. These are the two fundamental points or fundamental centers, fundamental movements that will give a new foundation for life. For only such a refounding of life can bring about its direct government by the secret divine power above us and its transfiguration into a manifest expression of the divinity, not as now a disguised and a disfiguring mask of the eternal actor. Eternal actor here is actor with capital A. So there is an eternal actor behind the mask of this play of life here on earth. But it is a disfiguring mask in disguise. That disfiguration has to fundamentally change so that the revelation of the divinity in nature become direct, not this disfigured, distorted figures. Behind all the forms of life, however crude it is, there is a hidden divinity. It has to be brought forth. If it is to be brought forth, then this outer ego and the desire soul has to be dissolved. The true vital being has to be discovered, and the psychic being has to be discovered. It has to become the leader and guide this true vital and open to the Shakti that is coming down. That together will fundamentally transform life. This is the key to transformation. This is a yoga of transformation, not renunciation, rejection of life. And often people, without truly understanding, say that integral yoga doesn't have shadow transformation, because they do not understand this process. And integral yoga doesn't depend and use the so-called methods of many of the shadow works that uses psychoanalytical processes, internal inward regressions and stuff like that. We don't use that. Instead, we are dissolving the ego personality, dissolving the desire soul, so that the true vital emerges, and it is that which moves under the guidance of the psychic being. Together, it transforms the outer nature. The desire soul, the ego, everything gets transformed. So this inner light has to be discovered. That will automatically wipe out the shadow. That is the process. And it is so simple and fundamental, essential. It is a psycho-spiritual process. And often people confuse, saying that there is wonderful philosophy, but where is the practice? We don't know. There is no practice here. There is only philosophy. Because it is psycho-spiritual, it is not a technique. Relationship with the divine is not a technique. Falling in love is not a technique. It is a most beautiful, intimate relationship you can ever have, with the divinity seated within and the divinity pouring down from above, embracing, and you becoming a willing servitor, an instrument, open to the light and force. So it is not a handling of externals or superficial psychological motives that is its main purpose, but a refounding of life and its action on their hidden divine element. For only such a refounding of life can bring about its direct government by the secret divine power above us, and its transfiguration into a manifest expression of the divinity, not as now a disguise and a disfiguring mask of the eternal actor. It is a spiritual essential change of consciousness. This is what is happening. A spiritual essential change of consciousness. The very essence of our outer nature is changed by inward movement and discovering of the divine center and its radiance. It is a spiritual essential change of consciousness, not the surface manipulation, which is the method of mind and reason. Our mind and reason, even when it is studying consciousness, what it does is study of the surfaces. And the most visible surface where consciousness shows up is the brain. So now neuroscience is a big movement, but still we are scratching the surface. In the yogic method, we are going directly inwardly, subjectively, and discovering this deeper truth. It is not by analyzing the surface and manipulating the surface. Not the surface manipulation, which is the method of mind and reason, that can alone make life other than it now is and rescue it out of its present distrust and ambiguous figure. Life as it is on earth is distrust and ambiguous, and it is made more complicated by mind and reason. Our whole scientific revolution, fantastic in terms of its magical discoveries and incredible powers that it harnessed from nature, but the fundamental error is still considering that man is a consumer, and the whole purpose of all this knowledge is to produce objects of desire and feed this soul of desire with more and more objects of desire, and feed the ego, amplify the ego, individualization of the ego. And eventually what is happening with the development, people become lonely, depressed, materially opulent, full of consumerist objects, full of entertainment, but no touch of the soul. To prevent that degeneration and disintegration, we need to bring in yoga. And yoga, it is a spiritual essential change of consciousness, not the surface manipulation, which is the method of mind and reason that can alone make life other than it now is and rescue it out of its present distressed and ambiguous figure. So yoga is showing us a clear path forward for this transformation, and it's a very subtle journey. And here he has given us a meticulous map. That way we are quite blessed. There is Sri Aurobindo who has mapped all these regions, given us profound, detailed map of inner terrains. A yogin who has traveled, mapped, the cartographer of the inner worlds. I haven't seen anyone who has given such a meticulously detailed map. Because this map is so detailed, covering so much regions, many of the traditional schools of yoga find it hard to comprehend, hard to accept, because it is not matching with the various simpler framework given by many schools of yoga from the past. So they find it very, very difficult. Yet, if we put our heart into it, we find Sri Aurobindo is so accessible, in fact so enjoyable, and the very act of reading is profoundly transformative. I know by doing this podcast itself how much impact it has on me. Even if I have read this book many times before, the very act of reading, sharing it with you, this is really yoga or the works of knowledge as a sacrifice. And I see the very act of reading, dwelling on his lines, diving into it, my own internal not only understanding, but also the conviction and the strength that comes out of the growing truth within. And it puts you in touch with the deepest truth of your own being. So I'm hoping that this yajna that is happening between us is nourishing you, you're benefiting through this journey. And thank you for being there, receiving this. And please also do share your journey, insights. And for those who are new, please do subscribe so that we can keep in touch and learn and grow together and bring out this profound knowledge to the world by becoming living examples of this wisdom. Thank you.